Rose Rocks, and the environmental hazards this turnpike poses to Norman, Del City, Midwest City, and their drinking water from Lake Thunderbird, the watershed, and the Garber-Wellington Aquifer. Please welcome Dr. Serrato.
Hello, my name is Amy Serrato. That's Amycerato. And I'm a professional civil engineer in the state of Oklahoma with a specialty in geotechnical engineering, which is working with anything that's built with rock and soil, through rock and soil, and on rock and soil. And I'm very concerned about these turnpikes. Not only am I concerned about the turnpikes through Norman, the south extension and the east-west extension, but I'm concerned with the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority's overreach throughout the entire state. And as was said, I live directly in the path of the southern extension. So let's talk about the watershed first. Portions of the proposed east-west and southern extensions run directly through the inflow side of the Lake Thunderbird watershed area. The turnpike will have to cross more than a dozen stream crossings and wetland areas, including 2 wildlife management areas on Bureau of Reclamation land. These areas are very environmentally sensitive. Almost anything we do to alter the natural landscape will affect the environment, especially within a watershed. It will negatively impact the water, potentially forever, and our wildlife. Water that would normally soak in or infiltrate through an open pasture land or a wetland now runs off a large built impervious surface, in many cases elevated surfaces, picking up those pollutants from the traffic loads and transferring them to our ecosystem. There are several pollutants that we can never get out of our environment. They would be there forever, making Norman and the surrounding towns have to go somewhere else for their drinking water. This is not hyperbole. This would actually happen. Streams carrying these pollutants would flow into our lake, which is the drinking water source for Del City, Midwest City, and Norman. The Lake Thunderbird watershed must be protected at all costs. It is not okay just to shift this route 1 to 2 miles. It must go to the downstream side, away from the watershed, to protect all of our water. Not only will the turnpike route decimate Lake Thunderbird's watershed, it will also decimate our Garber-Wellington Aquifer, which is where most of us that live in East Norman get our drinking water from. Once those pollutants get into that aquifer, they can move in a lateral direction and pollute all existing water wells. Allow OTA to build on the Garber-Wellington or through our Lake Thunderbird watershed. So the surface runoff that doesn't make it directly to the lake soaks through our soil and recharges that Garber-Wellington so our wells can pump our water for use. If these contaminants make it into the Garber-Wellington, Norman is in serious trouble. Without access to clean drinking water, our community cannot be sustained, because the health of a community is directly linked to access to clean drinking water. The Oklahoma Turnpike Authority is threatening to jeopardize the safety of our drinking water and our way of life forever. This pollution from the elevated turnpike, 6-lane concrete bridge deck that will have to span many miles of this turnpike, will forever impact the water quality of Lake Thunderbird and the Garber-Wellington Aquifer. The state of Oklahoma and all of the environmental regulatory agencies along the city, with the city of Norman, Del City, and Midwest City, must demand that the OTA move their proposed route out of the Lake Thunderbird watershed. And furthermore, if this project continues inside of the watershed but through the Garber-Wellington Aquifer, it is imperative that the OTA be forced to determine and execute a transparent and viable plan on how they will mitigate and remedy the damages of construction and stormwater runoff that will forever poison the Garber-Wellington Aquifer. Not only do these proposed routes impact our drinking and groundwater sources, but they will destroy a rare geologic formation that makes our small part of this planet so special. Barite roses are distinctly Oklahoma. Our state rock since 1967, these exquisite natural wonders are found only one place on Earth, in a thin band between Lake Stanley Draper and Noble. Their occurrence is very localized. The rich barite rose zone in the vicinity of Lake Thunderbird and Noble is an area of ongoing study and is extensively used for educational purposes. These rose rocks are cherished by Oklahomans and mineral and rock enthusiasts from around the world. If the only existing vein in the world of barite rose rocks is paved over by the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority, the city of Noble would lose its designation as the rose rock capital of the world and lose its main tourism draw. Rock hounding tourism would decrease, educational engineering geology field trips would stop, and we would forever lose these wonderful outcrops bearing our state rock and national treasure. The citizens of Oklahoma, together with our elected officials, must hold the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority accountable in preserving these rare geologic formations. You can help make our state rock a recognized protected geoheritage and national heritage area and stop the OTA from destroying these amazing barite rose rocks forever.
I am very pleased today to introduce Stan Ward. He's a native Oklahoma, raised and educated here in Oklahoma, and he's earned a law degree and practiced law in California for about 13 years and moved back. He served as OU General Counsel and has continued to practice law. His home is in the direct path. Mr. Ward?
Well, retirement is not all it's made up to be. Let me assure you of that. When this project came to my attention, my wife came into the bedroom and said, "Picture in the paper that says 8001 Etowah Road is where the new Turnpike Exchange is going to occasion." That just happens to be our address. And that was the very first notice that we had of this project. A wise man once said, "There's a big difference between reasons that sound good and good sound reasons." This turnpike sounds terrible, and there's no sound reason for its justification. So you start with this proposition. Somehow the fancy label of Access Oklahoma got tagged onto the project. I call it Appropriate Oklahoma. And in Oklahoma, like most places, property rights are cherished. And people move to the country for a specific reason. They want the solitude, they want the separation, they want to get away from this hubbub world that we find ourselves in on a daily basis. It is a lifestyle choice, and people choose it deliberately, and they choose it for good, sound reasons. So you look at this situation and say, well, who are the people who are really pushing this project? Who are its promoters and profiteers? And then that raises this question before I get to those persons. How sound is a project when you have secreted the project from the public? State government is supposed to be open, it's supposed to be accessible, it is supposed to be a government of the people where the sun shines on the business of the government. It fails in every one of those categories. As we've already heard, it's going to be destructive to the wildlife, and that's a very important area, and we've dedicated 160 acres to wild care release. So, you have these propositions that people choose property in the country for specific reasons. And to see the wild deer, the turkey, the coyotes, the eagles, the owls, and you name it, we've got it out there. And when we moved out there, we were told that you're part of the Lake Thunderbird watershed. And the city of Norman pulled the first maneuver to devalue my property by saying that you can't develop more than 10 acres or less than 10 acres. So They have imposed limitations, and now we have people that not only want to limit, but they want to take the property as well. So we know that this project was done without much thorough thought or planning, even though its proponents will tell you to the contrary. We also know that rose rocks are important, and Amy pointed this out, and we've got a huge vein of rose rock on our property. One of the pieces stands up just about as tall as that curtain. It's an amazing piece of rose rock, and it's an amazing area that needs to be preserved, for not just for the Ward family, but for posterity. And that's what we're looking to do, is to try to present this in such a way that the public is going to be able to enjoy this property for generations. Because after all, what is a property owner? You only have a life estate. You're just a guardian and a caretaker. And so what we want you to do is to be good stewards of your property. And I think that's what most people in the rural areas are, as they're fine stewards of the property. So if you go on down the line and you look at the other issues, was there an appropriate study made? Did anyone do a study of the environmental impact? If it's been done, has it been shared with any of you folks? So that would be a step in the right direction to see what is the total impact of this study on the entirety of the properties that are going to be adversely affected. We also know this: just because your property is taken doesn't mean that you're the only ones adversely impacted. Do you want to live next door to the Turnpike? Do you want the pollution? Do you want the noise? Do you want the trash and the debris that turnpikes will bring to your area? And I think the answer is a resounding no. I could go on to say that there are many other factors that have not been considered, but I want to turn briefly to who are these persons that are going to benefit by this project. Well, let's start with the project engineers and the acquisition right-of-way people who come out and negotiate with you to try to get your property without going through an eminent domain process. And let's then move on to the land acquisition firms that represent all of these folks, the bond lawyers, the bond consultants. Have we stopped there? Oh no, there's a bunch more that profit from it. Wall Street speculators and investors. Now we have other people that are going to get in on this act. And who are they? Well, we have heavy equipment operators, road contractors, and last but not least, the politicians. So how does it come back around to politicians? It's called donations. So all of you folks need to go down and check with the Ethics Commission and see who's giving these contributions to the politicians who are supporting these types of projects. We know that there's only 2 or 3 turnpikes that are self-sustaining in the state of Oklahoma. And does it make any sense from a feasibility impact study to have more turnpikes, more losses, so you weigh on these giant scales property rights, lifestyle, and ownership of property without being forced to sell it versus people who are going to profit by a turnpike system that does not make economic sense. The games that are played to make it look sensible get right back to where I started. There's a difference between reasons that sound good and good sound reasons. We're into this fight for the duration. We intend to be heard, and we intend to fight the good fight, and we know that the court process is available, and we also know of the pros and cons of accessing the court system to come to a favorable result. It will not be swift, it will not be cheap, but it will be enduring. And I think everyone in this room that's here in support of stopping the Turnpike understands and realizes the importance to buckle down, gird your loins for battle, as the Bible says, and take the mighty armor of God forward and try to say, put a brake on this whole project. We've had enough. And we've had enough of being trotted upon by politicians who don't think that we're smart enough to see through them and to understand who they are that are making the money from this type of a project. So to save 20 minutes, is it worth destroying over 600 properties? And I think everyone in this room knows the answer. It's not only no, it's hell no. Thank you.
All right, we have a few minutes left for the press to ask questions. We got Q&A going on. Anybody back there have questions for our?
I'll start. What has the response been, if there's been one, from OTA to you guys?
Oh, yeah.
Pam wants to answer questions.
Anyone?
That wants to-
Inger, have you had a response from OTA?
Had no response. I've had no response from OTA. I have written directly to Secretary Gatz. I've written to the governor. I've had no response.
The OTA has come out and said that they will do an environmental study, but the environmental study is being run through Garver and Tulsa, and they say that they'll be done with it in December. That is not an environmental impact study. That is just an environmental assessment, which is a cursory look at the whole route. And OTA says they're going to do one, but they're just maybe checking the boxes, not actually going to do a real impact study.
And Poe Associates did tell us in a community forum that they would, if the bonds are let, start buying properties before even that study is done. They could not guarantee us that they would not start buying property even before that insufficient study is done. So we did hear that in a community forum.
And I think another answer to that question is, when we had that public forum, who from Poe and Associates was there? We had 3 people. Who from OTA appeared? No one. Stone silent. Even the stones couldn't speak, as the Bible says.
Okay, next question.
What do you consider your next legal options then?
Well,
Use the,
process that you get into a condemnation.
use the podium, I'm sorry, there, just with audio, we be able to capture you.
It's relatively simple. They come out and negotiate with you. They send these land acquisition folks out. Some people make a deal, most don't. If you don't make a deal, what they do, the OTA will go down and file a petition in district court in Cleveland County. Then 3 commissioners get appointed. These 3 commissioners determine the value of your property. They are supposed to pay you the just compensation for the value of the property taken, and if they don't have a total taking, for the remainder of the property that is left over, plus relocation expenses if it's a total taking. You don't like that, you can ask for a jury trial, and you can have 12 honest folks from Cleveland County or wherever your county is make that determination as to what your open meeting. And if you do not comply with the Open Meeting Act, it makes any action taken, if it's a willful violation, void. So they would have to start the process all over again. So we have people that are going to be looking very carefully at the agendas and at the last 5 years at least of the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority to see if in fact they have given notice that's reasonably calculated to tell we the people of the business to be transacted. You just can't say to consider turnpikes. It doesn't get it done. You have to be more specific than that. We had that situation come up in Norman with the funding of the police. And I was the attorney representing the FOP in that matter, and that's where the city fell short. They failed to write an agenda item that was sufficient. So we're going to look at every one of these legally. That is one. There are other arguments to be made based on some statutory construction. So again, this fight is going to be hopefully resolved short of the courtroom, but if it can't be, that's where we intend to head. I hope I answered your question.
Okay, any next question? All right, that concludes our rally today, I'm sorry, press conference today. We have the rally at noon. I would ask and encourage all of you to please meet us upstairs on the 4th floor. There, 9 speakers, I'm sorry, and we'll see you all shortly. Thank you. Thank you.